everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Brian.
And I'm Sean.
And we got another video for you guys today.
So today we're going to talk about maintenance-free gardening. I used to all the time get a customer to call and say, I want a garden that's maintenance-free. And I'm sorry to tell y'all, there's no such thing as a maintenance-free garden. But there are steps you can do to make it easier so you don't have to do as much. So we're going to talk a little about that. And we're going to talk about a couple plants that you can use. So I would say number one, an easy way is if you have a smaller space or you want less to have to deal with, is consider a dwarf. A dwarf's going to allow you to put the plant in that space without it getting as big.
Yeah, it's all about doing your research on each one of the plants that you want to have in your garden. One of the cool things me and Sean were talking about is most every plant and style of plant that you see that you like, there's going to be a dwarf version of that, and then a larger, upright, bigger size of that. So that doesn't limit you on your space. If you're like, man, I really like something that's got a white bloom and I want a hydrangea, but I can't have it too big, there's one for you. Or same thing with like blood goods and things. We're going to get into some of these cultivars here that kind of help you maximize the space and work with different locations in your garden where you may not be able to fit something big. And the dwarfs kind of give you that opportunity to put something there that's going to be low maintenance. You're not going to have to prune it back every season.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially also some of these with it being a dwarf. If you have a window or something like that you don't want that plant growing up in front of, a dwarf is an awesome, excellent alternative to the big one. And like you said, that for any type of garden space, if there's a certain color, a certain structure, leaf structure, growth structure that you're looking for, there's going to be a plant out there that's in a dwarf version that's going to fit that spot.
Yeah, so let's start right here with a couple. And you were talking about how, if you've got a spot and you want it to be low maintenance and it's a smaller location, you want to go with that dwarf. So what do you got there?
So we have the Rhode Island, so Acer palmatum Rhode Island Red. This is a dwarf version of what Brian has.
Yeah, we've got Acer palmatum bloodgood. This is that beautiful, typical upright maple that you see out there. It can get 20 to 25 foot tall. Gets a nice upright, broad canopy on it. And then we have basically the dwarf version of that.
Yeah, this dwarf version, the Rhode Island Red, you're going to get about 6 feet in 10 years, 6 foot by 6 foot. Yeah. It's not going to get that big, but you're going to get this very similar colors. The leaf structure is very similar. So it allows you to get that look and maximize the space without having to get that big tree.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of talk about these because we get these questions all the time through the office, and they say, I've got a space, it's only about 6 by 6, but I want one of those red maples in there, So this gives you the alternative to the bloodgood, which is the typical cultivar that you'd see out in the landscape. It's going to be a nice big tree, but if you got a small space, the Rhode Island Red's the way to go. That way you don't have to keep trying to prune this giant tree back every year to keep it in that small little space.
And also with lower maintenance gardening, you want to do your research first before you just start buying plants and sticking them in the ground. You want to know what your sun exposure is going to be, and then also your soil. Is it how wet it is? One way you can test that is we would go dig a hole about 1 foot wide, about 1 foot deep, get a gallon of water and pour it in there. And just come back, walk away and come back and kind of see how quickly that drains. If you come back, if you pour that in there and you come back the next day and there's still water sitting in there, you're going to know that soil is going to need to be conditioned or work with because you know it's holding too much water. It's not going to properly dry out. So that's just an easy step, because if you can eliminate those issues of water issues or any of those things, you're not going to have to deal with that in the maintenance, because if you stick it in the ground, it's too wet. Right. You're now dealing with the maintenance issue of, am I going to have to pull this plant out and relocate it, or am I going to have to do something different? So if you can get all that information, do your research first, and know what you're dealing with, you're going to have less maintenance later on because your plant is going to be a lot healthier and a lot happier.
Absolutely, man. That's a great point. Good drainage soil. We talk about it all the time on this channel. I know Matt and Tim say it on almost every video because it is one of the most important things. Your Japanese maple is not going to thrive in a soggy, wet soil that stays that way all the time. So if you've got that spot and you're like, I want a maple there, and it stays wet and soggy all the time, that's probably not the spot you want to plant a Japanese maple in. I really like giving these two examples because I think it's the perfect example of what you can find in dwarf and larger size plants that give you that same similar look. Right here I've got a hydrangea called Wedding Gown. Gives you some huge, beautiful white blooms on that, but it only stays like 3 foot tall. So this thing is not going to get out of control in a small space if you've got a small spot in the garden and you want some beautiful white blooms there. And what do you got, Sean?
I've got the hydrangea phantom. So you can even see just in the 1 gallon pot, you could already see the difference already. But you've got the white blooms, very similar to leaf structure.
Yep.
And what did we say this was? About
I believe this was
6 foot?
6 by 6 in 10 years. So it gets basically twice the size of this plant in that 10-year range. So I mean, it's definitely good to do your research on each one of these plants so that you can put the right one in the right spot.
Because that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right place, right spot. Because that's the thing, as I say, there's no such thing as zero maintenance gardening. But if you start off on the right foot and you start off with the right conditions, with the right plants, that's a lot less you're going to have to worry about.
Definitely. And we were going to get into some mulch, kind of talk about mulching. That's a great way to control the climate in which your plant is living in. It's going to protect the soil from getting too hot from the sun. It's also going to help with your moisture control underneath that soil, because it gives a kind of a vapor barrier there in the garden. And I mean, you don't want,
weed control.
And weed control, absolutely. And we don't want to do the giant volcano of death. That's definitely one, I'm sure, Sean, in landscaping, you've seen a lot of guys doing that.
Oh, see it all over the place. And not just that. I've seen a lot where typically with mulching, you're, like you said, moisture control and weed control are the 2 biggest things you're going to get out of mulching. But with mulch, you want to pay attention. A lot of times you'll look, if you buy it as a bag, you'll see, oh, it covers this much space. And a lot of people think, like, I'm supposed to put 3 inches of mulch down.
Yeah.
That sounds great in theory. 1, you're definitely going to buy more mulch from the manufacturer. And 2, you're putting so much down, you might see the benefits of putting it that thick, but when you come back, because that mulch is going to break down, add nutrients to your soil for your plants, but as that breaks down, you're going to be coming in with more mulch. And if you're coming in every time to put mulch on, you're putting 3 inches, in a couple of years, you're going to have a mound of mulch everywhere, and you're not going to be doing yourself any favors.
Slowly, you're burying that plant deeper and deeper into the ground, and that's not healthy for your plant, which is going to lead to all kinds of disease problems with your plant. Pests are going to get in. You want to definitely keep the mulch away from the base of the trunk, because that kind of encourages insects and fungus to be right up against the bark of that tree. You want to keep that mulch pulled back away from the trunk. That's such an important thing to remember. I mean, and then we want to talk about a little bit too about what kind of mulch you're using.
Absolutely. With the type of mulch that you're using, pine mulch is probably going to be your best. 1, it's going to break down the best and add those nutrients to the soil that your plants thrive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then also, you want to be aware of certain mulches. I know it could be very aesthetic. You see some gardens where they have a red mulch or colored mulch. So the truth is, with those aren't really mulches. What they're doing is they're taking old 2x4s, they're grinding them up, putting them in a spinner, and they're using a dye or a paint. So 1, you could be adding chemicals and stuff to your garden from the dyes and the paints, and it's not really, they're just wood, they're really wood chunks. It's not really a mulch. It's going to take longer for them to break down. It's not going to give you the same moisture control, and it's not going to give you the same weed control. It might look pretty with having a red mulch, but it's really not going to add, you're not going to get the added benefits of the moisture and weed control out of those type of mulches. And also I wanted to mention, a lot of people like to go out and get weed cover or weed cloth. And with that weed cloth, I would always tell people, when I did installs, people would say, what about weed cloth? And I say, if you really want to pay extra, I can, 1, it's the cost of the weed cloth, and then 2, the time and maintenance to put that in. And the truth is, when you put any type of mulch or anything on top of it, weeds are going to grow regardless, because those seeds from those weeds are going to be inside the mulch, inside that soil that's on top of that cloth. You're really not going to be preventing weeds. Unfortunately, maintenance, the best thing you do is you're going to have to deal with weeds, but if you use mulch properly, it's much more manageable.
Yeah, and we're talking about today trying to make your garden as low maintenance as possible. I think that's really something a lot of people are looking at. We all want that beautiful landscape. We can just go out there, plant it in, and then just let everything take care of itself, right? Doesn't always work that way, but here are some tips of how you can make your garden a little less maintenance. So another thing we always like to talk about is conifers. This adds an evergreen interest out in your garden. all year. I love that about evergreens. So we got a couple of them here today we wanted to give examples of. I've got a Picea abies dandelion. This thing stays really small. This gets about 4 to 5 feet in 10 years. Definitely a dwarf variety that gives you that nice yellow color. It has that kind of real nice spruce feel out in the garden. And then we've got another example right here.
So we got the Picea orientalis skylens. This gets about 12 to 15 foot in about 10 years. But as you could see, the growth habit is so close to that.
Yeah.
So again, if you have that smaller spot or you want that less maintenance, you've got this right here. If you got that space, you got this right here. And then what's wonderful about this is come winter, you don't have to worry about picking up any leaves.
That's right, man. Talk about low maintenance plants. Most conifers are in that field for sure. You can usually just plant them out. They're very easy to grow, and they give you that beautiful evergreen interest out in the garden. I love that because a lot of times in the winter you get, after all the leaves have fallen off everything, you might just look out in your garden and be like, I've just got a bunch of sticks and twigs standing up out there. If you have a beautiful skylens or a dandelion there, it gives you that nice spark of yellow golden color out there in the landscape. It's going to look beautiful.
Now, something else you might want to just kind of keep in mind when looking at your space, to help with the maintenance free, don't overcrowd the space.
Yeah.
The more you allow that bed or that room to breathe, the less maintenance you're going to have to do.
Definitely. And you know, it's hard to kind of give that control of, you know, you want to just plant a ton of things in there. And a lot of times too, you see a little 1 gallon plant and you think, wow, that's nice. Look at that little size right there. Well, in 10 years, you know, especially if you don't pick the right plant for that spot, in 10 years, you're going to be fighting that. You're going to be like, man, I put this in the wrong place. Now I feel like I've got to go out and prune that every year. So definitely overcrowding an area is one of those things a lot of people do that create even more maintenance on your garden, where you're always having to go out and prune on there. That's what we want to try to eliminate. We want to try to give you guys a low maintenance garden. Hey
guys, if you like these type of videos, please comment, please hit like, and let us know what kind of topics you want us to discuss, because I think Brian and I, going forward, we're going to be doing a lot more of these garden design tips and help videos and whatever we can. So if there's any type of topics you want to hear, be sure to comment and let us know.
Yeah, if you subscribe to the channel, make sure you ring the bell, because that's going to give you the notification every time we upload a video, which is 7 days a week. We have content on there. We've got tons of different stuff going on.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.